Greetings, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I'm Craig Fahle, and joining me today, once again, as they do every Friday, Nancy Derringer of Deadline Detroit, and, of course, Allan Lengel is here as well. Thank you for both for being here today. And an interesting week that we are having so far.
Incredibly.
Let's just start right at the top, shall we?
Okay.
Congress asking for the unredacted Mueller report seems to be more important than ever, given what is trickling out of the unredacted report. Apparently, Michael Flynn told Mueller and his team of investigators that he got pressure from both White House staff and members of Congress to sort of slow walk or impede this investigation in some capacity.
Craig, are you suggesting that the president engaged in yet another incident of obstruction of justice?
Well,
I am shocked.
Is that what you're saying?
That is what I am saying.
Stunned.
Oh my gosh.
And the interesting thing about it is that he was fired like a week after he spoke with, and this is just coming out today, he was fired a week after he spoke with President Trump's personal attorney, who said, hey, you need to give me a heads up of anything that might implicate the president. Said this of Flynn. Flynn didn't do that. Axed.
Yeah.
So he's gone. So that's not a good sign.
No, that's not a good sign at all. And that was redacted. I wonder why.
Exactly. So that was redacted. And the other thing that came out now is that a judge that is looking at this is ordering unsealed the contents of a phone conversation that Mr. Flynn had with the Russian ambassador. So there could be something that's in there that we might learn about this as well. And so we'll have that alarm turned off there in just a second. I love live stuff. It's fantastic.
It just goes to show we're human.
Well, absolutely. But, I just think that there's so much more to mine here. And all the efforts to keep the unredacted part of this out and the refusal to give this stuff over to Congress at this point in time is very, very telling.
Yes, and I'm being snarky and sarcastic, but at the end of the day...
I'm pretty serious.
At the end of the day, I am finding myself very, very, very saddened by all this. On Monday, I was listening to another radio show, which shall remain nameless, in which a local journalist turned PR guy was talking to the host about impeachment and about the Mueller report. And they had on, for balance, because we always have to have balance, a former head of the state Republican Party.
He does not have to remain nameless. Probably Saul Anusis.
It was Saul Anusis. Yeah, it was Saul Anusis, and it was Ron.
It
was Ron Fournier, and it was Steven.
Got it.
And Anusis's defense was simply to say basically, you're not talking, I can't hear this. That was what he was saying. The report showed absolutely no obstruction. And they're saying that's not true. That's not true.
Yeah,
did you read the report?
He was saying?
Yeah, there was no obstruction.
Saul was.
It was complete exoneration, and you can't give it up. And it was a failed coup, and all this other stuff. And it's just like, I'm like, what? What is this world that we've lived in? That we're living in?
It's the Trump talking points where you override the facts and you just keep saying, and your base believes you, and even those who don't believe you or in your party. Continue to repeat that mantra, and it's sad.
It really is.
The concept of truth. It's so frustrating, really, to be a journalist. Thankfully, at least half the country believes what they read in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Not to say that every single thing is correct, but they do a pretty good job of reporting there, and it's just shameful that. Although I admit to having a little bit of bias if I see something on Breitbart or I see something on Fox News, I'm a little more skeptical, and I may be sometimes a little bit more dismissive than I might be of another story in another publication. But
I'll tell you.
I get that. I get that concept that Trump has been able to get his followers to reject anything that the New York Times or the Washington Post reports.
Well, interestingly enough, I was watching cable news this morning, and yes, I'm into self-flagellation, apparently. And so I'm watching cable news this morning. CNN and MSNBC were both all over the Flynn stuff and the revelations from that. Fox News, in the meantime, was hell-bent on tearing down this notion of the SAT actually taking people's background and life experiences into consideration for college admissions. Sure. Exactly. So that was what they were all over. And they, of course, found an African-American gentleman to talk about how horrible this is and how, we need to let people in on their merits. And this says that, somebody like me couldn't make it without that. And I'm like, no, I think but they were all over that and didn't touch any of the Trump stuff.
You know what
I was just going to say, just for the people who are listening who may not have heard this, the SAT is talking about adding another factor to the score, and they're calling it the adversity score, and it's a number that will take into consideration what kind of high school you went to, your income, the various challenges.
Did you have to work while you were going to high school? Did you have hunger in your family? I mean, were you poor? All these things these hurdles that have been put in front of people.
How were you when you went in to sit down to take this test? And I mean, that's what the adversity score is, and that's what they are all over.
You see, you know what they should have called it? They should have called it a handicap. Just like, okay, because all the people who are denouncing it, exactly, they're more than willing to take that handicap if it means they can win a couple of bucks off their buddy who's better than they are. Yeah. So if you're going to adopt the same thing, it's exactly what it is. It's fair. That's the fair way to play the game. Well, you know what? Taking this stuff into consideration might be a good idea. Right. Because I'll tell you what, I had it a lot easier than a lot of other kids who busted their butt to get what I did. Right. I'm not above admitting that. Right. Yeah, I worked hard. Doesn't mean that somebody didn't have to work a heck of a lot harder. Right. Exactly. I don't see any problem with it, but Fox seemed hell-bent this morning on making sure that notion was destroyed.
Right. Well, I was going to say, just back up a drop, it's interesting, and both all the cable stations are somewhat guilty, particularly MSNBC and Fox, of doing this, where they want to show like, hey, we're getting the other side. So MSNBC will find a Republican consultant who really is not representing the core.
No, it's never Trump or
Fox. Fox is like, well, let's find a black person who doesn't represent really the black person, collectively, the thought there is like the
a black conservative.
Thomas. Yeah. I mean, somebody who really isn't, Sure. And so it's interesting how they do that and say, hey, we're being fair and balanced.
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, though, MSNBC this morning was talking about the abortion bills in Alabama, which we'll talk a little bit about as well, because that's a huge story this week that I think we need to get to, not just Alabama, but here in Michigan as well. And they actually did have a serious pro-lifer on who was trying to argue that, Alabama's bill, it goes pretty far, but, this could be the case that actually, defeats Roe v. Wade. And he was arguing that Alabama was absolutely right to put this in there because it's time to actually challenge this, because the piecemeal approach that the pro-life movement has been using for the last 4 decades is not yielding the results that they would like to see.
No.
So he's suggesting that Alabama is right. Force the issue. Throw that. I called it a Molotov cocktail on the front steps of the Supreme Court.
Right.
We'll see, but this is exactly what people said was going to happen.
Right. I know.
Although I mean,
it's the Handmaid's Tale.
It's so extreme, and I think
Pat Robertson came out against it.
It's intellectually dishonest.
It's so extreme. So look, if it goes to it goes in the case will be filed with in U.S. District Court. It'll be litigated there. It'll go to the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court will, in all likelihood, will say, that's like way out there. We agree with the Court of Appeals. We're not even going to hear this case. I mean, it's not. I mean, they're always looking for something to set precedent, and it's going to have to be something pretty grand to overturn Roe versus Wade. And that's not the case that's going to do it.
Well, the fetal heartbeat bills, though, that are being passed in a number of states could be very well the thing that does that. But you look at the debate and where it's going right now, Nancy, I'm a little freaked out, beyond a little freaked out at what's happening. I mean, we had the Speaker of the House in Florida referring to women as host bodies the other day in the discussion about this. So
if they were intellectually honest, and if they weren't trying to like slide this thing through, they would call women who seek abortions felons, because if I hire a hitman to kill my husband, okay, if they truly believe that a heartbeat constitutes a living human being, all right, let's use my husband as an example, okay? Say I hire a hitman to kill my husband. I meet with the hitman. I say, I want to kill my husband. He says, okay, that's going to cost $500. And I give the guy $500, and then he goes out and kills my husband. What prosecutor in the world is going to say, honey, you're just a victim. You're a victim. And so we're only going to charge the hitman. Of course they're not going to do that. They're going to charge me too. And I deserve to be charged. So all this stuff about how, this is not aimed at the other victim of abortion, the grieving woman who's left with this empty womb after this abortion. They're saying we're only going to charge doctors. And I mean, tell me how that makes sense.
Well, and if you threaten the doctors, obviously they're not going to practice in the state, which makes it impossible to get an abortion in the state of Alabama. It's just not going to happen. Nobody's going to risk 99 years.
And every well-to-do Birmingham matron who finds herself at 42, her children mostly raised, ready to get back to work, suddenly pregnant again, or her 15-year-old daughter pregnant again, it's just going to go somewhere else, like they've always done, like they have always done. They're going to fly to New York. They're going to fly to
semester overseas.
Well, no, or they're going to fly to some. I mean, in Columbus, Ohio, where I grew up, I mean, there used to be a morning flight to LaGuardia, which is when abortion was legal in New York City and not in Ohio, and it was always full of mothers and teenagers, girls. And then they would catch the afternoon flight home. I mean, that was just, you'd go to New York, you'd get an abortion, and you'd come back the same day. And that's exactly what's going to keep happening. And the only women who are going to be seriously affected by this are the women who don't have the means to do this.
Right. And there's always going to be illegal abortions performed. I mean, there's going to be somebody who's going to perform it, and some who are not even qualified.
Right. I mean, we have these drugs that you can order online. I forget the name of it. There's pills, there's, the RU486 thing. You can do all of these things, and that's what's going to happen. And a lot of them are going to be
but if you're taking away access to those medications as well, which a lot of people have a problem with, and so what you're seeing, in many of these states is the procedure's not going to be available, and neither are the methods to prevent the unwanted pregnancy. And certainly the day after. I mean, they're talking about you've got 6 weeks basically in Alabama,
right?
And if you don't know that you're pregnant, well, then you're out of luck. And the Speaker of the House said justice delayed is justice denied in that case. So basically every time you have sex, are they suggesting that if you don't want to get pregnant, maybe you have to take RU486? I mean, that's just not.
Well, RU486 is a different drug than. Are you thinking of the Plan B drug, or I mean,
excuse me, whichever the morning after.
That's the morning after pill, and I don't know what the chemical name of it is.
Yeah,
RU486 is actually a drug that can cause you to spontaneously abort a pregnancy. The point is, these drugs are out there. I mean, women in developing countries order them on the internet. You can probably order them on the internet here. There are going to be scammers who are going to sell these things, and they're going to be sugar pills. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of terrible abuse of women and, struggling women and poor women, and nobody seems to care except for other women. Well, and nice guys like you.
Well, in Michigan passed its own set of bills this last week, and this was, they knew that there was going to be a gubernatorial veto of this. Governor Whitmer has said, and this is basically aimed at eliminating a procedure that typically is used in second trimester abortions,
right?
Especially if there's fetal abnormalities or some viability issue,
right?
With the baby, and eliminating the one procedure that doctors say is the safest with the least pain and the least complications. And Representative Lasada from the Grand Rapids area said, you know what, we should get rid of that because it should be painful if you have this procedure done. And I'm thinking to myself, this is sort of warped, and it's all about God, and this is God's will, and we are letting God really infect the politics around this issue in a way that's technically not supposed to happen when it comes to our legal system.
The separation of church and state, which the Constitution. I mean, it's interesting. There's people who look at in other countries that are, like Iran, where religion obviously plays a very key role in government and in law, and they think of it as primitive, and yet here the same thing. I mean, with the whole gay marriage issue, it was like, well, the Bible says a marriage is between a man and a woman, and well, the Bible is not supposed to be dictating our laws. And we're seeing this in the abortion. We're seeing it, with the abortion issue, is where they're trying to override any of the constitutional rights here and saying the Bible says this, and God.
Or they dress it up in their own, science, which is a heartbeat equals a fully functioning living human being, and it doesn't. It's.
Oh, very true. But here in Michigan, there's an interesting little tidbit in the law that a lot of people maybe don't realize is that the legislature passes it, there's going to be a veto. Well, Right to Life, or any other group, frankly, can just go out and gather the signatures necessary to put it on the ballot. And
Which
if
is
they
what they
gather
plan
enough
to do.
valid signatures, then the legislature can adopt it, and it does not. The governor doesn't get a say in it whatsoever. So
Yes.
the gubernatorial
But there's
veto.
still a constitutional issue involved. I mean, regardless,
Well,
there
potentially.
can be a law. I mean, look, I can go and get enough crazy people to sign a certain thing. I don't mean to say crazy people for abortion, I think. But I'm saying for some crazy issue, and we can get it on the ballot, it doesn't mean that it's constitutional and that it's going to be able to be.
Still, though, I mean, the whole idea of getting these signatures
Direct
is to
democracy.
put it on the ballot, so let
Right.
the citizens vote on it. But this is a way to bypass even that part of the process.
Right.
Where if you have a legislature that's friendly to your idea, they don't have the guts to pass it on their own. Or if they do, they don't have the way to get it through the governor, who is of
Right.
the opposite party. So this way, you just gather 400,000 signatures out of the 8 million people that live in this state, 400,000 signatures, and then the legislature can pass it, and it doesn't actually go to the voters at all. So a
Right.
very, very small minority of people in Michigan might be and the ones that end up enacting this law because of the way that this is set up.
But we
And I'm
see
thinking-
it in Alabama. I mean, that is,
Well, that was duly passed and signed by Governor Ivey
and the
down
governor
there.
has signed that into law. That doesn't mean that it's going to be law.
Oh, the next
it's
day,
gonna-
by the way, she sent a prisoner to death. The next day after, she
Yeah.
pronounced that every life is sacred, she goes,
Right,
which is the button on a
right.
death penalty guy.
So I mean, there's an example right there. I mean, it's been.
But
it's
what
signed
Craig
into
is
law.
saying is right though. This is
I don't
part
like
of
this-
Michigan's constitution.
Something that's got to be tweaked.
This is good
It's
luck
an
with
end
that.
run around our participation in this.
Right.
system.
It's supposed. It's to empower the grassroots. Unfortunately, this
Fine.
was from the 1963-4 state constitution.
I don't have an issue with putting something on the ballot if citizens want to see it on the ballot and letting people vote, but it's doing it this way so that the legislature can do something without the vote of the people or without the signature of the governor, I think is kind of something that we need to address.
Well, and they're going for a what they call they're calling it dismemberment abortion. It's intact DNA basically. It's dilation and extraction. But it is. I mean, and if you've ever known anybody who's had a second trimester abortion, these are wrenching cases. I mean, these are cases that you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy. People who have found out that their fetus is developing, without a brain, without a windpipe, without, some heart, whatever. And they don't, I mean, these are wanted pregnancies that women are making very difficult decisions to end, either to preserve their chance of having another baby in the future, to preserve their own health. I mean, or lives in some cases. I mean, this is astonishing. Well,
we'll see what happens with all this. It's coming to a state near you
Yeah,
soon.
I know. It may come
and
in-
every
I know.
state is jumping on board. Ohio is looking at some pretty
Ohio.
ridiculous stuff.
Oh my God, I can't believe I grew up in Ohio. It's
Like I said, typically when Nancy Kaffer is on one of the shows with me, I make her answer for all of Alabama.
Yeah.
So from now on, because that's where she's from.
Alabama.
she calls it Bama-splaining.
Yeah, she's like, I'm not going to Bama-splain this one.
I'm going to
And-
Buckeye-splain this.
Yeah, there
to
you go.
Yeah, right.
So that Buckeye-splain, I like it. Let's get back to Michigan here.
Okay.
Representative Larry Inman, a Republican, was flirting with the folks in the Carpenters Millwrights Union over the prevailing wage law last year, which
Batting
of course
his
was passed.
eyelashes.
Batting his eyelashes via text message, suggesting that, hey, the money's not coming fast enough for you to get me to switch my vote on this prevailing wage law, because there are a lot of people in his part of the state that are millwrights. They don't necessarily want to see their wages go down with the prevailing wage law change. And he said, there's 12 of us on the Republican side that might switch our vote.
Yeah.
And
But you
his-
got to get some checks in the mail.
Yeah, his text message said you got to max out to our campaign committees.
Right.
Oh,
And
by
then
the
he
way,
used-
we
and then
never
he-
had this conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to say
Right.
he used the phrase that he probably heard on some 10 o'clock drama on network TV, which is, of course, we never had this conversation.
in the text message. So he's come out though. I mean, the Speaker of the House, Lee Chatfield, has said he needs to step down immediately.
But he said
because
he's
he
not
has
going
been indicted, but now he says no. All these charges against me are quote crazy bullshit is the phrase that he used.
Oh, my.
And he said text messages can be misinterpreted is the other thing that he said. He says he's going to fight this, and I innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, it's
I'd be
true.
interested to see how a jury
It's-
feels about this, or whether or not there's a plea bargain that's coming down the road.
It's good to know
But it's bad.
that corruption in Lansing and in Washington never goes out of style. I mean, the fact that he would sell a vote is allegedly is pretty disgraceful.
In the immortal words of Rod Blagojevich,
I was just going to say,
this isn't something you just give away.
Right. Well, I was just going to say,
apparently
Rod
$30,000 is the asking price.
I was going to bring up Blagojevich because he had Barack Obama's Senate seat, up for
That's
bid.
right.
It's like,
It's
this
not
is
something
worth
that's
something.
something worth paying for.
That's exactly.
I mean, this little measly vote here.
Well, and the thing is, that was a pretty important vote.
Yeah.
Right,
And the
sure.
fact that this,
And they did give him some money, didn't they?
well, but not everybody got enough.
Right,
So
exactly.
that was it. You guys
Right.
better
And who do
max
you
it out
think-
pretty quick.
And
But-
who do you think dimed him out to the FBI?
I don't know. I don't know.
Probably the people he voted against the bill in the end.
Yeah,
they
I
probably
was just gonna say,
screw you.
I think the union.
By the way,
probably-
I didn't get what I
Just,
paid for.
to back up
but
before-
you could implicate yourself there, though, because soliciting a bribe is,
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
to back up before, when I was talking about anyone can put a crazy thing on the ballot, I didn't mean to say that the abortion issue is
Understood.
a crazy thing, but I'm just saying you can put anything on a ballot and get enough people.
But you need 400,000 signatures to get it there, which is a
Right,
pretty big
right,
deal. And
sure.
Right to Life of Michigan is one of the only groups that can get that kind of signatures.
They can
will have
absolutely
paid
swing that.
gatherers. The only thing that may stand in their way of that, by the way, Michigan's got this rule that you can only get a certain percentage of signatures from certain parts of the state. So say you've got something that's going to be really beneficial to Metro Detroit and everybody outstate hates it, you can't just go and gather all your signatures in Wayne County.
Has that new law been tested in court, though?
I'm sure it will be at some
Yeah,
point.
I know. I mean, that kind of throws a
I
wrench
wouldn't
into
be shocked
everything.
if Right to Life is the one that pushes it.
Yeah. Plus, we're also kind of like crashing into the gerrymander, the new state redistricting commission, and the gerrymandering court case that said they had to draw some new Senate districts. So, excuse me, we may have a legislature in 2 years that's very different from the one we have now. So,
Well, very true. So what do you think? What do you think about Chatfield asking him to step down? Again, this has not gone through court at this point in time.
kind of pro forma, isn't it? I mean, you have to say something, other than innocent until proven guilty. I mean, that's not what they said to Todd Corser.
he's entitled to.
You mean Wolverine?
Yeah.
Those billboards?
Gabe Leland, who is under indictment, is remained on the council, which he should have stepped down way before he was indicted for some of the things as conflicts of interest.
Right. But I mean, I think he probably said, I mean, he made a request. The guy can just say, nope, I don't want to do that. So, I mean, it isn't like he brought the hammer down. They're not talking censure or rejection, are they?
Well, we don't know at this point in time, but here's what his attorney had to say about his behavior. And it's a guy named Chris Cook, who's an attorney based in Traverse City, which is where Inman's from. And by the way, if you're under federal indictment, there are a couple of firms out there that I think people should probably look into rather
And they're
than
not
some
in
accounting
Traverse
firm up in
City.
Traverse City. Says, quote, it certainly wasn't an effort to solicit funds. And it's perfectly legal for a candidate for elected office to accept endorsements. As part of that endorsement process in Michigan, you can also have up to $10,000 from a PAC group contributed to your campaign coffers. That's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear.
But boy,
from the
it's a
text.
quid pro quo kind of thing there. You
Right.
give me this, I'll give you the vote. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not.
It's the quid
somebody
pro-
can give you money. You're not supposed to give them something in exchange for that money.
Yes.
Right.
Everybody assumes that happens, but you're not supposed to.
You're not
Pay to-
supposed to
pay
make
to
it
play.
explicit. Yeah,
Exactly.
pay to play.
You're
Yeah.
not supposed to say it. So that's, and this is great. This is great. So he's talking to the reporter. This is the attorney. When asked for clarification, this is from Bridge, Michigan, by the way. It says, when asked for clarification as to whether Inman was seeking to accept an endorsement, Cook said, quote, "I'm not going to let you cross-examine me."
Well, and didn't
like
Inman
that. That's a
himself
good
say
line.
the next time I'm going to do it over the phone? That was
Exactly. Next time.
lesson learned. It's like, don't
Well,
put it in writing.
I mean, this is one of those that, all right, you kind of screwed things up. So I think Inman might be in a little trouble. But I learned something by listening to Bill Ballinger's podcast, which is on Deadline Detroit this morning. The threshold for passing a bill just went down by one vote. So, their majority goes down by one seat, but so does the number of votes they need to pass something.
Right,
So
sure.
it's sort of a moot point
Yeah.
here in Michigan. All right, let's talk about a couple of other things that we've been looking at this week. Auto insurance. Auto insurance coming to a head here in Michigan. Governor Granholm has put down a new line in the sand saying, look, there's got to be some sort of guaranteed coverage for PIP. in Michigan insurance plan. I'm not going to accept reform that eliminates it altogether. So that seems to be the new threshold here.
Right. And also that there's some guaranteed savings there.
Yeah, well, that's it. There needs to be something that
you can't leave it up to the insurance companies to say, well, maybe let's see how it goes.
Right.
I mean, if we're going to be eliminating all this coverage, I mean, how can it not be cheaper?
I agree.
I would agree. I mean, look, there is a regulator for the insurance industry in the state. Every state's got an insurance regulator, but the question is, who are they working for? And that's always been the question. It's a very politicized role, you know, and who's in charge of it, how many industry people are on that panel. I remember when I covered the Engler administration, this was a big deal because he wanted to put the head of Farmers Insurance on the insurance commission, and people said, oh, hold on a second.
Now,
you know,
in
Fox
Indiana,
guarding the hen house kind of thing.
In Indiana, that stuff happens all the time. And they always say, well, who else should be on the insurance commission but somebody who really knows the business?
That's exactly right. So I don't know about that. All right, so what else should we get into today? There's a couple of other big stories that were happening around here. Let's look at this one. L. Brooks Patterson.
Yeah.
Talking about,
he's keeping his sense of humor, though.
He's keeping his sense of humor.
He's apparently writing a cancer diary, sort of, so to speak, for the Detroit News. Occasional pieces sort of updating, you know, the public on his progress through this very difficult, down this very difficult road. And I thought he was, you know, it's good to see that he's still trying
He's a kidder.
He's a kidder, yeah. And what did he say? Remember?
I love this line from he did a piece for the Detroit News on it, a column for the Detroit News. He said, when my oncologist dropped the bomb on me on March 4th, I did not scream, I did not cry, I did not stomp my feet. I needed a drink, but these modern hospitals have everything except a lounge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got to love the fact that Brooks is willing to own up to his lifelong battle and deal with that kind of stuff in a humorous way.
And then he says later that you cannot drink before your chemo session or like a day before, the day of, and like 2 or 3 days after that. So if you're having it weekly, that kind of like blocks out like half the week when you're allowed to drink. So
well, he says you put poison into your system. He's talking about the chemo. You put poison into your system, your hair falls out, you paralyze yourself for a minimum of 5 days, and then the witch doctor says you can't have any alcohol. Who says cancer's not a tough disease?
Well, I'm glad he obviously wants to do this on his own terms, and you know, these are his terms. I want to drink. Yeah.
And you know, but at the same time, yeah, the torch is going to be passed in Oakland County. It's going to be far different than it has been pretty much my entire life. I mean, when I was a little kid, he was just wrapping up the lawsuit on the busing. And that's where he got famous, obviously. And he became prosecutor shortly thereafter, what, 70?
By 77.
Yeah, I was 10 years old when he was in elected office. I'm 50 now, so
Spinal Column newspaper. I was calling him. That was one of my
Spinal Column newspaper.
The backbone of Oakland County livers. It was a chain of newspaper. I think it may be something out there as well right now. It was actually a good newspaper.
And it was actually called the Spinal Column?
The Spinal Column. It had different editions. Novi, West
Here
Bloomfield.
I thought the Plain Dealer was the best newspaper name in all of
Spinal Column. And it used to be, they eventually took that little tag away that said backbone.
Backbone of Allan.
It was they were trying to get a name, and they went out to the community and asked for suggestions, and a chiropractor came up with the name.
Hey, shock of shocks. We should probably end on this one because this is something we're all going to be paying for. My kid's going to be paying for. His kids will be paying for, and probably my great-grandchildren will be paying for, and that is fixing bridges here in Michigan. Are we shocked that Michigan, which has done such a wonderful job of keeping up its roads, has neglected its bridges?
Wow.
I can't believe that they're separate at all. I mean, to me they seem like they're of the same, you know, they're all of a piece, but I guess, you know, depending on where the bridge is located, it's a question as to whose job it is to maintain it. And to the surprise of absolutely no one, Michigan's bridges are in just as bad a shape as its roads, only they can fall on your head.
How could that be a separate thing? I mean, bridges are for cars, as roads. It's part of the infrastructure.
I have seen bridges in this state that actually have netting underneath them with chunks of rubble that have fallen into the net to keep it from falling on the ground.
Sure.
And then they put the plywood underneath it up there to keep that stuff from going.
Wow.
And we've seen what happens when you neglect this stuff. Remember in Minnesota what happened a few years ago when that bridge collapsed into the Mississippi River?
Yes,
right.
exactly.
And people died.
Right.
And it's just a matter of time before this happens. And they're saying the Free Press investigation is suggesting it may take a century
to replace them all.
To replace them.
Not for the bridge to fall.
Wow.
No,
right.
but,
no,
but
no,
a century
right.
to replace them all, which is just unbelievable.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Unless we want to, add another huge gas tax to take care of those too. But I mean, this is what happens. If you don't fix a hole in your roof, the hole gets bigger and it costs more to fix. If you don't fix a hole in your road, the same thing will happen. The more you delay this stuff, and it's understandable why it was delayed. I mean, this has been a shrinking state for more than a decade now. We're going through an extremely painful transition here. But at the same time, the lesson that we are learning over and over and over again is you can't put this stuff off indefinitely.
No, you certainly cannot.
No.
And I have a question. Is anyone going Sunday night to the Fox to see Roseanne Barr?
I am not. I am
sorry,
not.
no.
Only if she's singing the national anthem. That would be worth it for the price of admission right there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We read a little piece, and there was a review in a paper, the Morning Call, in Pennsylvania, talking about her performance in Pennsylvania, and she does ask the crowd, are there any Trump supporters out there? And I think she got a loud round of applause, and she said, well, I guess I think I found my crowd.
Right.
And so I assume it's going to be a pretty pro-Trump, just
there's
like
nothing wrong with that.
Bill Maher is going to be showing up, and it's like I assume it's going to be a pretty anti-Trump crowd.
Well, who would pay money to see Roseanne Barr who,
Look, she was a gifted stand-up in her day. I mean, she had a great stand-up routine. She earned that TV show. I mean, she had a lot of talent. And so if she's coming back and trying to, sort of rebuild her image, at least, make some money, which is never – I have no fault for anybody trying to earn a living here. If she's got a crowd that's going to accept her, then go for it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
It's like the
and
Charlie Sheen, tour that happened. Remember that?
That didn't do so well, did it?
Yeah, but it got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Tiger blood, and all that kind of stuff.
Is she going to be at the Fox?
She's going to be at the Fox.
Okay. It'll be
She'll
interesting
probably
to see.
get a decent crowd, I would guess. It's not going to, it'll be interesting to see.
Have you checked StubHub to see what the tickets are selling for?
Yeah, they were
you know what? You
pretty
guys
cheap.
keep talk amongst yourselves.
They were pretty cheap. They were going between $25 and $55.
Plus Ticketmaster. So that's the list price. Okay.
Yes.
So she's coming in at more than half the price of Hillary and Bill earlier this month.
Which I wouldn't have bought tickets for that either, though.
I know, but I understand that they really undersold that house, too. They had
$39. $39 for the Sunday night show at the Fox Theater in Detroit. Now, they're $80 at Big Fresno Fair in Fresno, California.
Ooh, okay.
For Roseanne?
I wonder if is she still good as a stand-up, though? I mean, the stories that I've read about her, I come away with the feeling this is a deeply, deeply troubled woman, probably with some form of unmedicated or poorly medicated mental illness. And I just end up feeling pity for her, which is not a good look for an entertainer,
Until you see what she rakes in at the gate.
Oh God, yeah, I know. Well, like Craig said though, she built a rep that was well earned. And now she's demolishing it one tweet at a time.
I mean, people like people who speak their mind. Obviously, we have a president like that who people
don't like people who compare black women to monkeys. So, which is what she did.
Yes,
we'll see.
Among other things,
it'll be interesting to see how many people. But I'm going to guess she's going to get a decent crowd out there.
Fine. Yeah.
I mean,
there's nothing wrong with that. Pro-Trump people deserve their entertainment too, and if this is their
they deserve to laugh too.
Yeah, they deserve to laugh.
Well, speaking of Trump, a couple things we're going to be watching over the course of the next week, just to give people a little idea of what I'm paying attention to. What's going on with Iran? Are we getting closer to any sort of conflict there? The president this morning, when he was asked, are we going to go to war with Iran, said, I hope not.
I hope not.
Not the answer you're looking for.
No.
But he also, the other news that we will be watching closely here is the fact that he has postponed the tariffs on automotive imports from Europe, from Japan, from Korea, and other places as they still try to work out some greater trade deal. But people are breathing a little bit easier on that front, but we shall see what happens with that.
Sure.
So anyway, thank you both. It's been an
Thank you.
interesting week, and I certainly appreciate it.
I guess
Allan
we'll
Lengel.
see you at the Fox.
Are
there you go.
are there ever uninteresting weeks in this city? I don't think so.
No.
You know,
So, isn't it the most interesting city in America?
it is the most interesting city in North America. That's my feeling.
It certainly has kept us all busy for
Yes.
many years, which I
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Well, Allan Lengel, Nancy Derringer, thank you very much. Michael Lucido, appreciate you engineering the broadcast today, despite that phone ringing in the middle of the thing. But, we forgive these things.
It's an office.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I'm Craig Fahle. This has been The Week That Was on Deadline Detroit. We'll see you next week.